Washington versus New York. Somebody from the NFC East is going to get a win. Maybe. I mean, a tie is in play too, right? Also, did the umpires throw out the entire Orioles ground crew last night? What's that about? Let's go.
Watch out, Vince Coleman. Run.
Thursday Night Football, Washington, New York. Taylor Heinicke starting for Washington now with Fitzpatrick on the IR. You remember some of the good things he did last year in the playoffs against Tampa? Chase Young loves Heinicke. He says he could start on any team in the NFL. Woo! For the Giants, year 3 of Daniel Jones started with the loss to Denver and another fumble. Head coach Joe Judge, quote, "Let this guy grow," end quote. Mina, should the Giants continue to be developing Jones the way they are, or is it time now to show up tonight against Washington?
It is time. It's an unfortunate situation because of how good Washington's defense is, but it is year 3 with Daniel Jones. It's no longer time to let him grow. He's not a baby. He's a fully grown adult man, and he is one who is frustrating to watch. Tony, watching back last week, he puts together good drives where he's accurate and he makes plays and he's explosive, and then they end in these head-scratching turnovers, often in high-leverage situations, and it's a script we've seen play out over and over and over, and it needs to end, frankly, if he's the long-term future of this franchise. But as far as tonight goes, unfortunately, as I mentioned, he's not only under figurative pressure, he will be under literal pressure as well because the Washington front is extremely good and the Giants' offensive line is extremely bad. I expect them to go run heavy, but if Daniel Jones doesn't stop turning the ball over, they need to call it on him.
Israel Gutierrez will bring you in here on how the Giants should be viewing Daniel Jones right now.
One of the things that I see that you can fix is the fumbles. Like, I don't know if you can fix interceptions, making bad decisions, but I do think for a quarterback, you can sort of fix the fumbles, and that's where last week's turnover was. It's where a lot of his issues were. But I'm not huge on Daniel Jones, but before I can sort of bring the house on him, you just have to look at the offense, too. Like, I just sat here and watched Dan Orlovsky earlier today absolutely torch the Giants offense, saying it's the most archaic thing in football right now. Said that, a former Cowboys coach, you might recognize him, Jason Garrett, running the offense, is stuck in 2005. And so it limits what Daniel Jones can do. Do I think in a wide open offense, in a different, more sort of today's offense, can he be more of today's quarterback? Possibly, because he can move. Not necessarily the quickest guy, but, straight line speed, obviously pretty fast. So I'm not ready to say that he can't be a starting quarterback for any team in the league, but I am ready to say that with this particular group of coaches, I think this is about as good as you're going to see him. So either as the Giants, you got to go this year saying it's either going to be these offensive coaches I stick with, or I'm going to give Daniel Jones one more year.
It's week 2. The offensive line is a little bit of a mystery for this team. Saquon Barkley, maybe that can help Daniel Jones a little bit, welcoming him back. Kevin Blackistone, how should the Giants be viewing Jones right now?
Well, I think he should be getting a little bit of a mulligan because those next-gen stats that Mina always likes to mention show that he's 41% hurried when he drops back, the most hurried quarterback in the league. Maybe that has something to do with why he gets fumbled, gets hit so many times, gives up the ball, maybe throws some interceptions, also doesn't have many weapons out there. And talk about last year, right? Last year he didn't have Saquon Barkley for almost all the season, so now he has no one to hand off to. And he's behind a bad offensive line. Does he have to play better? Absolutely. When he was healthy, and when Saquon Barkley was there, they came into FedEx and lit the place up. Saquon ran for almost 200 yards. He threw for like 5 touchdowns. He looked like the future of that team. But right now, he is in himself a reflection of how bad that offense is for the New York Giants.
But you're willing to give him time. Mina, I see you shaking your head at a couple of things that Kevin was saying. We'll get to you in a second. June, please.
Well, it seems like we're really reaching a boiling pot moment with the Giants fan base, too, and whether or not they want to support Daniel Jones. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation out of Giants camp about Daniel Jones saying all the right things, carrying himself the right way, teammates loving him. But at a certain point, you have to perform on the field. There was a lot of this talk around Mitchell Trubisky when he was in Chicago about how all of his teammates loved it and how people really respected him. But when he wasn't performing, there's only so much you can do there. And so I think we're starting to get to a point with Daniel Jones where it's time to perform, or else, it doesn't matter all of that other stuff about people liking you in the locker room.
Mina, back in.
Yeah, I just want to address the fumbling issue. Look, he is very pressured. And like I said, the offensive line deserves a lot of the blame. But go back and watch him in Denver when he fumbled the football. He scrambles and he's holding the thing. Like, I don't know how he fumbled it, frankly, but the ball seems allergic to Daniel Jones's hands. And at a certain point, when you have this many fumbles, which, by the way, it's a historic number for his first 3 seasons, it's on the quarterback, not the offensive line.
Yeah. I mean, Israel, you said you can teach somebody not to fumble. But then why haven't they? I mean, maybe let's get on that for a second. Carry the ball around to everywhere you go, including the shower. All right, it's a must-perform performance, is what June Lee says. Does he perform tonight, Mina? Who you got?
I got Washington just because I think the front seven is so good, and I think he's going to be under duress.
Israel.
Daniel Jones.
Same. I think they're going to destroy that Giants offensive line. I got Washington.
Well, Washington's elite defense didn't look so good last week. They gave up over 400 yards.
You're right, they didn't look good, but you're wrong for using that word.
Well, but I used it for a reason because that's what the broadcasters called them at the beginning of the game. An elite defense that they hadn't even seen play this year.
All right, maybe we'll get a pick from you in a second. And how about you, June Lee?
I've got Washington. I think Daniel Jones is going to be running away from Chase Young all night.
All right, we'll move on. Week 2. Look what we got here Sunday. Kansas City, Baltimore. Boom! Mahomes versus Jackson. Lamar indicating it's not about him and Mahomes. Quote, it's not about me and Mahomes, end quote. And additionally, roll tape.
It's not about, me and Mahomes.
There we go. I told you he said that. Meanwhile, Sammy Watkins, who's interesting because he plays for Baltimore now, he played for Kansas City in the past, is saying it is about Jackson and Mahomes, and it's time for Jackson to get a win. Israel, how do you consider it all?
Well, it wasn't too long ago that I remember Lamar Jackson saying the Chiefs are our kryptonite. And I believe it was 1 year ago where I saw a headline in the Baltimore Sun that said Patrick Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson could define the NFL for a decade. It's about those two quarterbacks. It's about a couple of MVPs, and it's about who everybody wants to watch. The only thing that I would sort of shift a little bit is maybe it's more about Lamar Jackson than it is about Patrick Mahomes. We already know what Patrick can do. We already know about his weapons. With Lamar, he doesn't seem to have the weapons, obviously, and you need him to do more. And so I think that's where he and his team are just trying to take that pressure off of him and say, hey, it's not really about you two guys, not unless we're lining up with a Tyreek Hill or a Travis Kelce on our side as well. So in that respect, I think they are trying to calm that discussion down because it really hasn't been a fair fight so far.
Mina Kimes?
It is unfortunately about Lamar because he has to put this entire team on his back. Their kryptonite isn't the Chiefs, it's the injury bug. They are going into this matchup with so many guys out. We know that the running back room's been devastated. Rashad Bateman, their first pick this year, the wide receiver is out. And last week we saw how that offensive line is battered. Now we're hearing Ronnie Stanley, left tackle, might not play. Ollie Villanueva, you last saw getting whooped, might play on the left side. It's just not a great matchup. It would have been fantastic if both these teams are heavy, and I feel like the Ravens' only chance of winning is if Lamar Jackson goes supernova.
June Lee, heading into this matchup, Lamar says it's not about the quarterbacks, it's about the two teams. Are you here for that? Do you listen to that?
I'm right there with Izzy and Mina. I think it's about Lamar versus Mahomes, and it's also, when you look at the QBRs that both quarterbacks have put up in the head-to-head matchup, Lamar's at a 54 QBR and Mahomes is at an 86. Like, it hasn't really been similar levels of production when they've gone up against each other. And so it's one of those things where obviously we love talking about Lamar and Patrick Mahomes as two of these generational quarterbacks, but Patrick Mahomes has so far, through his performance through the Super Bowl, has been able to kind of separate himself from the pack. And so it reminds me a lot of the discussion that happened around Tom Brady and Peyton Manning way back when, where people really wanted those two quarterbacks to be pitted against each other generationally, and obviously Brady has run away with it over the course of the last decade or so.
And Kevin Blackistone.
Yeah, in this particular matchup, these are two quarterbacks and two teams that are headed in the opposite directions. Last year when they played, it was a 14-point deficit. The first couple of times they played, it was a close game. So it is about more than Lamar, but he is the last man standing with the Ravens right now. The defense has got to do better. They've given up an average of 31 points a game to the Chiefs and just haven't been able to keep up offensively. And I don't know how they're going to do it with the weapons that he doesn't have, the running backs that he doesn't have, and now all this pressure on him, expecting him to perform and pull out a miracle.
And I'm just thinking about our conversation about Daniel Jones. I said, well, he needs to play better despite his lack of an offensive line. Well, the Ravens would kill for the Giants wide receivers, Galladay, Sharp, Slayton. And it really is a lack of weapons for Lamar across the board.
Isn't that an institutional failure here? I mean, injuries happen, although why do so many injuries happen to this one team this year is an interesting coincidence. But isn't that institutional failure, not going out and getting weapons around Lamar Jackson?
Well, they tried to get Juju Smith-Schuster, and he went back to Pittsburgh. They drafted Bateman. I really can't blame them. This offseason has been the one from hell for Baltimore.
Our final thoughts there. Some time and thoughts here on the U.S. gymnastics team. Simone Biles, Allie Raceman, Michaela Maroney, Maggie Nichols. You know the names, representing hundreds of names you don't know. We celebrate them, we crown them, we wrap ourselves in their gold and highlight it when it benefits us, but we did not listen. No one protected them. We allowed the one thing to be taken from them that can't be given back, their youth. So I asked a question that's been asked before. How much is a little girl worth? This week, in the entire 2 years of this abuse investigation, and the 18 years of the abuse, and the exploration and exploitation through it all, you can focus on the impossible strength of these women, and we should. They are the best of us. But you must center on this as well. What did we do? So now we ask them again, and this is painfully true for all survivors, to relive their trauma. When we receive this most vulnerable act, it is our duty to carry it forward. We can stop at merely asking how this could happen. But if we truly mean those words, we have to confront the worst of us. We have to confront our silence. Predators thrive in silence. They thrive on the distraction and the fatigue of somebody else is going to say something. When our systems around us blatantly and actively fail, we have to change them. The FBI turned a blind eye. That's what Simone Biles said in her statement. Michaela Maroney said they minimized my abuse and falsified my report. We have to change us. The lack of regard for female athletes, the way we care for our survivors, this is the depths and the extent of systemic sexism. It fuels abuse, but it is abuse on its own. And that is all our responsibility. How much is a little girl worth? Alabama, Saturday. Dan Mullen hinted he's sticking with starter Emory Jones, but that both quarterbacks know the plan this week. Anthony Richardson has been a revelation in part-time quarterback duties. 70 and 80-yard touchdown runs, 75-yard touchdown passes. Has some thinking the only way the Gators have a chance is with him at quarterback full-time. Israel by herself knowing the plan compared to making a switch to Richardson.
I'm going to sell the idea of knowing the plan and not making a switch. I want them to make a switch to Anthony Richardson. Look, I love Emory Jones. He actually chose Florida over Alabama, so there's a little bit of incentive there to start him and really beat Alabama. But Anthony Richardson, not only is he 6'4", 230, freak of nature, did you see that number? He's wearing number 15. You know who else wore number 15? He's got to throw to Jacob Copeland. You know what number Jacob Copeland wears? Number 1. That's Tebow to Harvin. I want to see that connection again.
All right, Kevin Blackistone, should Florida make a change here at quarterback before the big game versus Alabama?
Well, they knew this big game was coming in the offseason. It seems to me you would want to make the change there and just give Richardson the job, but that you haven't, and that 78% of the snaps have gone to a guy who has bided his time and waited for this opportunity and apparently won it. I think you stick with him, and if things go sour, all of a sudden you pull the carpet and go with the other guy.
I do think that there's value in trying to hiding how much you're going to be playing both quarterbacks in terms of a strategy perspective. And I do think that Dan Mullen, if more so than any other head coach in college football with Chris Leak and Tim Tebow, knows how to handle the dual quarterback thing. I think, though, Richardson is just so dynamic on that field. I would just go with him long term.
Mina Kimes.
Yeah, I'd roll with Richardson. He's averaging over 20 yards a play. Granted, that's on only 22 plays, but you gotta roll the dice against Alabama because you don't have a chance otherwise. Just take the gamble and go for it.
Buy or sell 2, Falcons Buccaneers Sunday. Matt Ryan says the Super Bowl loss has no bearing on this game versus Brady. Mina, buy or sell that?
I'm buying that the Super Bowl loss has no bearing on him, but what will be bearing on him is the Bucs defense. Atlanta offensive line is a problem. It's why they lost, and this is going to be ugly.
June, the Super Bowl loss has no bearing on this matchup, Brady versus Ryan?
I don't think it does, but I do wonder if that number really haunts Matt Ryan. Like, is he just seeing 28-3 just constantly in the course of other parts in his life?
Like when the clock says 11-11 every day? Yeah. Kevin Blackistone, how about you? Yeah.
Well, of course, it bears on the rest of us, and and the second graph in his obit will point out the fact that he was in this particular game. But obviously, he's forgotten about it. That's way back in history.
Interesting.
I think he's forgotten
We
about
don't
it.
need to be writing obituaries right now, Kevin Blackistone. Hold that a second. Israel Gutierrez, how about you?
I think he thinks about it every single day of his life. Look, I lost a flag football championship on the most insane ways. I didn't run the clock out properly, gave up a touchdown with like 5 seconds left. Dan Le Batard was there watching.
Okay.
I think about it every single day. I'm in the Hall of Fame of that league. I still don't have a championship because of that. It is absolutely something he thinks about every day. No doubt in my mind.
Buy or sell 3. Let's talk about this next story. You may have seen it. There's some context, though, now. In the exchange you saw on the Detroit Lions sideline last week, quote, "It's 2 guys just want to be great." That's what Amani Oruwariye said, speaking there. But he wasn't the one involved in it. It was Jeff Okudah getting it from cornerbacks coach Aubrey Pleasant. There was later a moment of Pleasant embracing Okudah. That was after another touchdown was allowed by Detroit. And then later in the game, Okudah tore his Achilles on a play. He's now out for the year. So this is all not good here for Detroit. But the exchange on the sidelines in week 1, how does that look for this team, Kevin Blackistone?
I mean, that's okay. That's a coach getting on his player for something that we don't know, an assignment he missed. And after all, he comes up to him in the end and he puts his arm around it and says, we'll move on to the next moment. I think that's what a good coach does.
It's been interesting because there's been a lot of conversation about how Dan Campbell's more emotional than a lot of NFL coaches, and which has always been kind of traditionally masculine in the stoicism way. And so this makes me kind of put a little bit of a kind of magnifying glass on just the emotions of the coaching staff there and whether or not this is going to be a problem that continues to arise moving forward.
Mina Kimes?
I'm fine with it. I think there's sensitivity in Detroit because of the Matt Patricia regime questioning how players interact with the coaches there. But I know players who have been coached by Aubrey Pleasant. They love being coached by him. I think that's a moment where we don't know the context, but it's probably fine.
If we had lip readers here, you might see Pleasant saying, do your job, I believe, was kind of what I picked up there. Israel, how about you?
Yeah, and you can hear a player telling him to calm down, coach, a little, or see if you read his lips. Look, when your coach is telling you before the season that we're going to eat kneecaps, you're probably going to see situations like this. But if there's any coach that is allowed to yell at players like that, it's the dude with biceps and triceps like Pleasant right there. Did you see him in that shirt? I mean, they're practically exloading. That guy can yell at anybody.
Even flexing.
I go for you and Mina for that conversation. Kevin, June, I don't know. Thanks, guys. Front row seats for Kimes, Gutierrez, and Showdown next.
Watch out.